Hello and welcome to Chaos Effect, the podcast where two soy boys talk about things that make people on the other side very upset. I'm your host, McLain Hirschspiel, a 20-something-year-old white guy, and with me, as always,
the soy boy Tyler.
And instead of doing our usual of me talking about white guilt and us mansplaining things, we're talking about something fun today. The grim, dark future of mankind.
Yep. I guess. I literally have no idea what.
I was about to ask, so do you know anything about Warhammer 40,000?
Literally zero, other than what you told me before. Before, I don't remember when.
Yeah, so this is going to be a bit of a very different episode where we're going to do a lot of episodes later on because we're moving in the direction of entertainment media because you guys like it when we talk about that stuff. When we're going to do episodes where we break down the lore of things. This episode is not a good episode for that. Those episodes will be well prepared and researched by yours truly. This episode, I'm going off of Wiki and the things off the top of my head as I explain things to Tyler. So I guess I should talk a little bit about what Warhammer 40,000 is.
Yeah.
So the company that published Warhammer 40,000 originally started by publishing D&D characters, like miniatures for D&D. You know, like your little plastic guys you use.
I must also mention, I know almost nothing about Dungeons and Dragons too.
Right. So there was a demand at the time for a new tabletop game. So Games Workshop came up with the idea of, how about this game? We're going to call it Warhammer. It's a fantasy game. And we're going to have all these different, we're going to have your pretty standard Tolkien factions. We're going to have dwarves. We're going to have elves. We'll have humans and orcs and all these other things. And then there's actually three stories that came to how this came. Story one is they wanted to appeal to a new base, so they came up with a sci-fi game that was originally just going to be add-on, but spun off into its own game. The other is that one of the designers really didn't like fantasy, so he wanted to make his own spin on it. And the third is the one I choose to believe, which is one guy as a joke said, hey, I'm going to make a character that is so ridiculously overpowered that has all this stuff from space that he could just absolutely kill anybody and would be so ridiculously overpowered it wouldn't be fair. And he did it. But then they liked how it looked so much, they ended up building an entire spinoff based off of it. So as we stand, Warhammer 40,000 is one of the most popular tabletop games played in the world.
Oh.
Which it's fun. There's plenty of people who like it. Unfortunately, there's at least a good, I'd just say, fifth of that population that likes it are fascist.
That checks out.
Yeah. So we've talked about problematic fan bases in the past. Right?
Yes.
And usually it comes from people missing the messaging of stuff.
Yes.
We've talked about Star Wars and people rooting for the Empire. So Warhammer is an interesting case. There are no good guys.
Damn.
Even the one faction that is semi not evil is very suspicious. So, because of that, unfortunately, attracts a lot of questionable people with questionable beliefs. So where should we start, Tyler? I think I'm going to do this in the order of actually trying to explain some of the in lore oldest factions first, and also the ones I know the least about first. And then so that way when we're talking later and we go off on tangents and stuff I know more about. So the three oldest races in this game are the Eldar, the Orcs, and the Necrons. So the Eldar are space elves.
It's pretty cool.
Now, the Eldar play a big part into a religion that exists in the game called Chaos. Chaos consists of 4 gods. You have Nurgle, he's the oldest. He's the god of pestilence and disease.
They deadass named their fucking god Nurgle.
Yep. So Nurgle, now these are not the Eldar gods, but I'll get into how they tie into these gods soon. Nurgle actually is also considered the most loving of the Chaos gods because he actually likes his followers the most and gives them gifts. Now, unfortunately, his gifts are things like the bubonic plague, and there's a lot of memes of COVID-19,000 going around on Warhammer forums. And like there was a meme when remember when like Donald Trump got COVID? It's just like this is part of him ascending to him. Yeah. So yeah, where there is disease and death and plague and pestilence and also growth of life and nature, Nurgle is there. So then there's Khorne, the god of blood and war and violence.
They named the god of blood and war Khorne?
Yes. Anyway, because of that, he is kind of like, so he's really interesting. So he's supposed to represent like every violent urge, like is supposed to be his influence. Like, so anytime you've like looked at somebody and thought about punching them in the face, that's Khorne speaking into your ear. He's just out for war and bloodlust, and he loves nothing more than war and bloodlust. So then there's, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. So Zinch, or Ninch, I don't know. What?
That's a nothing.
Zeech. So I think he's pronounced Zeech. His name's spelled. So the thing I love and hate about Warhammer 40K is the lore is kind of vague enough for you to interpret things. Unfortunately, that also means they don't phonetically spell things a lot. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of left to guess how things are spelled. So Zeech is the god of knowledge, but also kind of has become the god of conspiracy theories.
Oh,
so like, yeah, it's like knowledge, but too much knowledge that makes you start to go crazy. He also hates his followers the most. Now, the last one is Slaanesh, the god of ecstasy, excess, sex, overindulgence, and art. So Slaanesh actually is the newest of the Chaos gods, and essentially came into existence because the Eldar fucked Slaanesh into existence. Any questions? So
elaborate.
So the Eldar are this like really old, right? They're not the oldest, but they're pretty old. And they used to have like this, they kind of like were like the Greeks of their time. They were really advanced and they had like these warp tunnels that people can go through. I'll explain the warp in a little. And they were able to connect and they lived in this like period of success. So like it began to kind of like, you know how Rome towards the fall had like excessive parties, lavish orgies, things like that.
Yeah.
The Eldar kind of did that. And because of that, they started going into darker corners of that of trying to find ecstasy, which then brought Slaanesh into birth, which ended up like eating. So the way Eldar used to do exist is when they would die, used to die because they could live as long as they want. Then they'd die and then they'd go into this like soul world and they'd respawn essentially.
Okay.
And then this post-death world, their spirit would live happy. Well, Slaanesh just started eating their spirits and eating them. So this split the Eldar into 2 separate factions. There's the Dark Eldar and the Craft World Eldar. So the Craft World Eldar are kind of like, I guess, Mormons or Puritans, where they've just become like so avoidance of anything that like they could come across as pleasure that they like, they're the, like, you know how the joke about like, so Christian, they fuck through a hole in the sheets. That's quite literally what kind of people the Craft World Eldar are. The Dark Eldar, on the other hand, you remember the Gibbs scene from Pulp Fiction?
Yes, I do remember the
So the Dark Eldar, instead of trying to avoid Slaanesh, tried to appease Slaanesh by providing tortured souls that Slaanesh can feed on. And because of this, Slaanesh kind of grants them to keep living and doesn't torture them and consume them, to the point where the Dark Eldar have began to mass industrialize torture.
Neat.
Yeah, so these, like I said, these are the groups I know the least about, but so I'm like kind of vague on these, but like if we ever go into do full lore episodes, I'll know much more. So like in the game, both sides play out very similar, that their armor is terrible, but they're very like fast, because elves are always incredibly fast in high fantasy. Mm-hmm. So the Dark Eldar are the emo cousins of the Mormon Eldar.
Sick.
Yeah. So then there's the Necrons. The Necrons I know incredibly little about. So there was once this war with this group of aliens called the Old Ones. So they are the precursors to humanity. They're the precursors to like everything. You play Halo ever?
I played a little bit of Halo, but I'm not versed in the Halo lore.
I'm trying to think of it like, okay, how about the, have you seen any of the Alien prequels?
I've seen Alien.
Okay. Then this is absolutely none of these analogies are going to help. So these were like the precursors to everything. And there's a lot. So the Eldar were possibly created by the Old Ones. The Orcs were created by the Old Ones. And some other creatures were possibly made by the Old Ones. So the Necrons were the ones they were fighting with, and they were called the Necron Tyre, I believe, or Necron Tier. And they, in order to beat the Old Ones, they turned their entire population into the Terminator. Yeah, and they have like this really big Egyptian skeleton theme, and they look like these like green cyborg skeletons. So now moving on to the factions I know more about. Which do you want to start with? Chaos, Tau, the Imperium of Man.
Let's stay on brand and let's go with the Chaos.
Okay, so Chaos. Actually, I'm kind of going to need to talk about the Imperium of Man first.
Okay, that's fine.
So the Imperium of Man started with this guy named the God Emperor of Mankind. Now, it's in dispute to how his origins are exactly, but it's believed that there was this group of like warlocks a long time ago and sorcerers, and they gathered, and like this is like ancient history, and they all did a ritualistic sacrifice, which led to the birth of this Mediterranean man from Turkey, who's kind of ethnically ambiguous, who has also been like every historical figure that has ever lived. I'm trying to figure out where to start. So he's possibly been Julius Caesar, George Washington, Adolf Hitler, Jesus Christ. And do you know that story of like the dragon that was slayed in Turkey?
Yeah.
Well, that dragon is actually a giant robot, and the God Emperor Mankind was the one who slayed it.
Oh boy.
So what do you think of
water?
So I think of this God Emperor Mankind.
Okay, so I'm kind of confused. So we have all this like fucking gods, like dark elves and orcs and shit, but we also have like regular human history too. Yeah,
so Earth kind of exists. Anyway, so Earth ends up prospering for a while. Like we do really well. Like we have aliens living amongst us. We create these AI robots. Then that all goes to shit. And then there's this thing called the Dark Age of technology. Humanity's divided. So the Emperor creates these soldiers called the Thunder Warriors. And they're all basically mentally ill berserkers in power armor he uses to conquer Earth.
Okay.
And they're the precursors to another group called the Space Marines.
Okay.
Now he conquers all of Earth and kind of begins to turn it into his own personal world. He does this because the Emperor Mankind's 10 feet tall, chiseled as hell, and can literally turn things into has magic abilities. And at this time, he's just going by the Emperor Mankind. The God Emperor doesn't come till his children. So he conquers Earth. He turns Europe into his palace.
So the entire continent
of Europe is his palace. Now, there's a lot of funny things that are mentioned about the lore. One of the funniest, though, is that there's a scene apparently where they're in a room that has the Bible in a glass jar, and they talk about it, and they're "Oh yeah, we don't let that get out there anymore." Yeah, that kind of was that's really dangerous. So the Emperor gets these 20 children, and he infuses with something called the gene seed, which basically gives him light versions of his genetics. These create the 20 Primarchs. Now, I forget how, but something happens where they all get split up and sent across the galaxy to different regions of the galaxy. And because of this, he loses all of his children and then tries to go to find them. This sends them all into different regions of the galaxy, and he finds all but 2 of them. And the Games Workshop people are never really clear on what happened to those 2. Now a lot of people are there's this one guy called Lehman Russ who's a space Viking. He was raised by space wolves, and he named his faction the Space Wolves. You still with me?
Yeah, no.
You just processing that?
Yeah. There was a lot of camera movement. I was like, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm trying to find something. Anyway, so people are Lehman Russ killed these 2. They keep these 2 Primarchs vague to who they are, because so that way people can make their custom factions and stuff. Okay, because this is a tabletop game, and I don't use one of the recommended armies for my paint scheme. I use one that I created. Because that's one of the things that they try to do is they want to keep it open enough people can come up with their own creations, yet follow the rules of the game. So a lot of the lore has to kind of have that vagueness to it. It's also why a lot of people are kind of frustrated the lore doesn't really move forward a lot, which I'd also like the lore to move forward, but it's kind of hard at this stage to have it happen in a way that would make sense. Anyway, so that's besides the point. So he finds his sons, and he has this one son named Horus. Now, he has another son named Logar, and Logar's on this planet that has a ton of churches. And he, after he finds out who his father is, he conquers this planet and builds a huge city filled with churches. And the God Emperor Mankind hates religion. Part of his crusade was he burned down all the religious churches and temples and everything on Earth. So he orders another Space Marine to go bomb this planet of churches to the ground because he's so angry about his son coming up with treating him like a god. Now that's his son, Robert Gilliman, who's the leader of the Ultramarines, which are space Romans. And Robert Gilliman is also the one who wrote all the codexes for the Astartes, which are the Space Marines. So each of the Astartes created their own groups. Now, Horus and Logar started influencing Horus because, Logar really liked religion. He was on a planet that was obsessed with religion. Because of this, Logar's approached by a chaos god who's hey kid, you want some religion? Which this eventually just led to Logar influencing a few of his other brothers, including Angron. Guess what his thing is?
What's
He's always angry. Yeah, so Angron was on this planet filled with slaves and fighting pits. And because of this, he had these things called, I believe they're called spikes in his head. I forget what they're called, but they're basically pain spikes that whenever he's not actively committing violence, he's always in pain. So he needs to constantly be committing violence or else he feels pain.
That's pretty fucking alpha.
Yeah, so he like ends up kind of joining Chaos. He obviously is influenced by Khorne very easily. So this begins the Horus heresy, where Horus goes against his father and teams up with Chaos to try to take over. We'll do a whole episode on this if we go down this route. Horus tries to kill his father. His father gets hospitalized. They put him on something called the Golden Throne to the point he's kind of in a state of dying all the time.
Kind of like how they had Palpatine in like the Rise of Skywalker, where he's like fucking.
Yeah, but if he's not conscious, so he's literally just a skeleton taped to a chair at this point. But if they take him off, the Imperium and a lot of factions rely on something called the Warp, which is like these portals that kind of go through space hell that allow for them to just travel super fast. And the Emperor Mankind controls a lot of that because he is psychic, and they rely on these people called psychers to do a lot of this psychic stuff. And he's like the most powerful psyker there ever will be or was. So there's a ton of theories to what will happen to him because of that. Some people say he will have a second coming, and so will all the dead Primarchs, and some say he's just done. So, yeah. So that's kind of the setup of just to give you an idea of like how Chaos became to be so powerful. So now there's just this endless war. Humanity is always in like constant turmoil, fighting Chaos, the Orcs, every other alien. The Eldar are on a fight for their extinction because the Slaanesh, the Dark Eldar are like industrialized, torturing everything. The Tau are trying to protect their tiny empire. The Orcs are just having a good time, and the Tyranids are invading. So now diving into Chaos. So I kind of gave you a branch overview of all the gods, but let's kind of go a little deep into each of them. So Nurgle, the first Chaos Space Marine chapter he creates is a group of guys called the Plague Guard and the Death Guard. Now, the Death Guard was under the control of a guy named Mortarabo, or Mortarion. That's his name, Mortarion. And when he was, he was one of the Primarchs, and when he was split apart, he was on this planet that was like this industrial hellhole that basically had so many hot, toxic fumes in the air he could barely breathe. Kind of like just like your average industrial city in the United States. So Nurgle kind of took advantage of him, and like now all of his guys are like gross and diseased, and they have like guts hanging out of them. Yeah, it's pretty. Were you trying to say something?
I said yuck.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty. And they also like have weapons that just like spew out plague and all these things. But Nurgle genuinely likes his followers the most of anybody. And when you become a follower of Nurgle, you don't feel pain from all these diseases, but you have them.
Huh?
So like you won't die from any of the diseases he gives you. And you're not going to be heavily affected, but you always have them. And it's clearly like physically affecting you, but you won't feel it.
That's interesting.
And like people get all these mutations, like extra eyes, their intestines are hanging out.
It's like, oh yeah, I guess that's just another Tuesday.
Yeah. It's yeah. And so then there's Khorne. Khorne is interesting. So Khorne's demons are these guys called the Bloodletters. They're literally made out of pure blood, and they just go around murdering everything. Angron obviously fell to Khorne.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So Angron's whole thing is like he's always angry, and he now has a kill counter attached to his head that's just he never takes off, that counts all the people he's killing all the time. So Khorne's obsessed with like violence. So like I said, if like you've ever had a thought of anger or violence, that's supposed to be Khorne influencing you.
Man, I've been influenced by Khorne quite a bit.
Yeah, so like literally anytime you're like you're on that verge of like I want to punch that guy in the face, that's supposed to be. So like Nurgle's thing is he'll grant you immortality, but at a cost. Korn's thing is he's driving you to that instant satisfaction that you get from violence and anger.
I'll take the guts hanging out of me.
Yeah, so and then he just kind of makes it that you always are angry and always are going for that bloodlust and violence. And also war. So there's actually one group called the Blood Pact. Their whole thing is they're followers of Korn, but they're not like violent and savage. They're well organized and they're just like very disciplined soldiers. And they were part of what was once called the Imperial Guard. So the Imperial Guard are like the common men of mankind, but we can go into them in a bit. So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on their chaos gods, or at least Nurgle and Korn.
You know, I kind of vibe with Nurgle.
So like that's the thing. Nurgle's also like kind of the god of drugs, because like his whole thing is like you're kind of getting high with him because of his like pestilence and disease, his toxic gets you
Nurgle.
Yeah. So like because they do drugs, Slanesh and Nurgle get along, and then Korn gets along with Nurgle because it's just like, oh, you kill people, I like killing people. I don't know why Korn's Southern in my mind.
I have an idea about why.
Yeah, and also to give you an idea like what Korn looks like, Korn is disgusting. He's like a blob of fat. And he's just like huge and disgusting. He has like boils and guts bursting out.
Is Korn with the K?
Yes, Khorne.
Let's see.
You might have to put Warhammer 40K after it.
Let's see. Bro, this is so fucking like overly edgy, and I kind of dig it.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say about the Chaos Gods is there's never actually been nobody's actually seen them. They've seen versions of them, but nobody's seen them in their pure form. So we only think Nurgle looks gross and disgusting because that's what we've been led to believe. But for all we know, he could look like Miryu. Korn is usually depicted as literally just like either the devil with giant horns and like a sword made out of like teeth or something like that, or as literally just a flaming suit of armor.
Yeah, he's just a dude sitting on this throne with like this really edgy, cool black and red armor with spikes coming out of his shoulders and shit.
Yeah. So now let's move on to Tzeentch, who's a dick. So Tzeentch Tzeentch, I don't know. We're calling him Tzeentch. I think I'm pronouncing it wrong. Tzeentch is like the god of knowledge and also magic. So like any psyker who's using like the warp and the magic that comes with the warp and sorcerer is technically also at the same time giving Tzeentch power. Now the thing about Tzeentch is he grants you power, but he hates his followers and he's cold. And he's always about change. He's always about advancement and moving forward. I wasn't really like political or like that deep in the Warhammer yet, but there's a lot of old memes of like Tzeentch, but it was Obama posters for change. Tzeentch for change.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So now the thing about Tzeentch is one of the people he turned from the Emperor was a guy named Magnus. Magnus got the worst deal of all of the Emperor's children. Magnus's boys, good old Magnus, were all like he really liked Psyker. Magnus was a Psyker. The Emperor Mankind hates Psyker, so he kind of didn't like Magnus. Magnus was also huge and born with red skin.
Oh?
Yeah, so Magnus kind of did not look human, even though he was human. He was a mutant. And one of the Imperium of Mankind's human things is like they're saying is like purge the Xeno, slay the mutant, and burn their heretic and stuff like that. So like a mutant leading an army of Space Marines. Yeah. So what happened to his guys is like they were in the middle of this battle, and he just like, I want everything to go back to normal. So all of the guys in his army, except like the Psykers, are turned into dust inside their armor, and their armor only lives inside them. And they all they can say is all is dust. And they're like in hell. So yeah, that's Zeech gets you. Zeech is like, you know how like the old stories of genies who are like, I'm going to give you this, but there's a catch. Mm-hmm. That's Zeech. Zeech like also is kind of called the Alex Jones of things, where he's just like going down these logic tubes that are so like insane that they're not true anymore. Everything's a conspiracy theory. You're like driven insane with knowledge, essentially.
Now let me tell you about the Space Marines.
Yeah, exactly. You have no clue how right you are.
The Space Marines.
So anybody who's trying to find truth, and I use quotation marks, ends up following Zeech. So now let's talk about the Chaos Prince Slaanesh. So Slaanesh is really interesting because also kind of shows how much things have changed since Warhammer started. So Slaanesh, if you're going to Google Slaanesh, Tyler, put your computer on safe search. Slaanesh.
How do I spell that?
Slaneesh, I think.
Let's see. Let's try this. Oh, yep, there he is.
Well, there they are. So one of the things about Slaanesh is they are every gender there ever will be and has been. And Mulata's fault. They're what?
No, I'm just seeing some of this art.
Yeah, the art's Slaanesh art is very NSFW.
It's very there's a variety here. Very inconsistent in depictions.
So like one of the annoying things about Warhammer fans is like they'll lean into one thing about etiquette. So like I'll get into Slaanesh besides, but the whole meme of Slaanesh, it's like, oh, Slaanesh is the god of weird sex. Ooh. And so Slaanesh, one, like the fact that they are like all genders, all sexualities, they're everything. That applies to their demons, like which happens to in like I'm not sure this is canon or this is shit fans say, but have been like described to have like all genitalia and stuff. So yeah, there's that.
Well, it's interesting if you say that they're all genders, but they are all these depictions just make them look like a big sexy lady.
Well, yeah, that's Warhammer fans being weird and kind of annoying.
Just like let me put these big ass tits on this.
Yeah, we're gonna talk when we talk about the Sisters of Battle. That's gonna come up. But yeah, so Slaanesh, it's like you follow Slaanesh, you get obviously like weird sex things as part, but also like, so me and you are both in the arts, you would say, right?
Yeah.
We'd be very susceptible to Slaanesh then. Slaanesh seeks out people who seek perfection, models, people obsessed with their looks, musicians, artists, two weirdo film nerds.
Damn.
And basically it says like, I can give you everything, but you then become so obsessed. So like musicians become so obsessed with finding the perfect sound. They will like create these sounds that eventually kill them. There's this one unit of Slaaneshi Chaos Marines called the Noise Marines. They have something called the Sound Blaster, which is just like a gun that shoots basically EDM. And it like ruptures the organs with sound. And then they also have like electric guitars connected to backpack speakers with like a bolter bolted onto it. A bolter we'll talk about, but you'll love it. So that's kind of all I got for Chaos. Like, again, like if we were to do like an in-depth episode on each thing, we could do an hour on everything I just talked about.
That's cool as fuck. I ain't gonna lie.
What? Noise Marines?
Yeah.
Did you look one up?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think of like the aesthetic of Chaos?
It's like I feel like it's like over designed, but like in a kind of cool way.
Yeah, so now like if you look up Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines, the Chaos Space Marines are basically just normal Space Marines they added spikes onto. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's kind of how they came to be, and they were supposed to be like the mortal enemy of Space Marines. So I guess since we're talking about them, let's move on to Space Marines.
All right.
So, Space Marines are fucking awesome. Space Marines are they're taken from the origins of Space Marines. I kind of went over this, but there are the Primarchs. Each Primarch was able to pick out their own army. So like Jagatai Khan, who's basically space. Oh God, I forgot to mention this about Khorne. Hold on, I need to go back to Khorne. So there's a demon who is everybody's pretty sure is Genghis Khan, because Khorne saw Genghis Khan being violent as fuck. Was like, I like this guy, I'll make him a demon, and turned him into a giant demon.
This guy's pretty based.
No, nothing about Khorne. It's like, this guy murders, I like it.
Well, Demon Genghis Khan gets a sip of water.
Anyway, so yeah, now there's Jagatai Khan, who's based off of Genghis Khan. So yeah, I'm going to go over a lot of the normal chapters. So I've went over some of the chaos chapters. So there's the Dark Angels, who I like. The Dark Angels are like space knights. Like, so their Primarch Caliban was from this planet that was filled with like knights, and it was kind of like the medieval times, but not. And when Caliban was there, because he's, it's like, oh, this child is suddenly 7'5" and ripped like Arnold Schwarzenegger. They actually had to breed a special horse just for him because he was so freaking massive. So he led an army of knights and conquered the planet. And the planet had all these like awful demonic monsters on it that he would slay, and all these knights would slay. But he found out when he this is like really cool lore, when he's like conquered the last house they resisted, and he found in like the basement of this house, kind of like, or castle, that they were breeding the monsters that they had to fight. And this is like really kind of meta, because they said without the monsters, the knights have no purpose. So we always need these monsters.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's kind of, a lot of people believe that's one of the reasons the Horus Heresy happened, is because so many of the Space Marines were afraid that after they had no purpose for them, that their father was just going to kind of kill them all or let them all die, because that's what kind of happened to the Thunder Warriors. So then there is the Ultramarines, who are like Space Romans, and Ultramar is like where they're from, and Gilliman, Robert Gilliman, because nobody is allowed to have a normal name in this entire series. So Robert Gilliman, his planet is like just like kind of very like Rome looking. It's like very big. It's very nice. Ultramar, and like all the Space Marines, like the commanders wear plumes and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of to give you the idea of the Ultramarines. Then there's the Imperial Fist. The Imperial Fist are good at walls. They build walls. They defend cities. And their enemies were the like their rival of the Chaos Legion is the Iron Warriors, who are good at siege tactics. So yeah,
it's a match made in heaven right there. The people that are good at building walls, and the people that are good at keeping people.
Well, and what I find funny is like the Iron Warriors. You watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
No, I actually haven't.
Okay, well, they're the Charlie for those who do. The Iron Warriors, before the Horus Heresy, they were the Charlie, because like while everybody else was doing these heroic conquests, they were doing these decade-long sieges that like took forever and just like had to wear down. So like they got all the dirty siege work, while like freaking Lehman Russ was riding a giant wolf in the battle. So then there's let's talk about Lehman Russ and his group of Space Marines. So then there's the Space Wolves. They're Vikings. They're space Vikings. There's not that much to them. Their Primarch Lehman Russ was raised in space. Well, he wasn't raised in space. He was raised by wolves. So he became obsessed with wolves, and they are kind of like they're Vikings. Like they're just savage warriors who go over the top in battle. They drink. They just drink all the time and party, and then they go fight. That's all they do. Drink, party, fight.
Rad.
Yeah. So then after that, we have the Blood Angels, who might be vampires. I don't know a ton about them, but I can say that they might be vampires.
Oh?
Yeah. They might drink blood. And their leader was called Sanguinius, and he had angel wings.
Hope they like blood as much as I like water.
They like blood. Then there's am I through everybody? Am I forgetting? Oh, there's the salamanders. So the salamanders are from this like volcanic planet. Their primarch's called Vulcan, and all the salamanders have like black skin. I don't mean like they're like African. I mean it's like pitch black because of the volcanic ash of this planet is mutated. And they all have bright red eyes that glow. But they're regarded as like the nicest space marines because like if like they have to choose between defending an ancient monastery that there's like 1,000 of, but it will be lost in this battle, or like keeping 1,000 civilians from getting murdered, they'll choose the civilians. Where meanwhile, if you were to get Lehman Russ, he's like, could we use the civilians as a shield? Yeah, life is pretty miserable, and
I was gonna say like this sounds pretty like this whole thing just sounds really fucked up.
yeah. Especially a lot of Space Marine houses kind of just kidnap the kids that they turned into Space Marines.
Oh,
and then they put them through challenges that they don't always survive before they get the superhuman powers. So yeah, there's that. Wait till we start talking about like the darker stuff, like the Imperial Guard.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So Space Marines the first step to becoming a Space Marine is you're chosen. So a lot of times like Space Marines will observe these planets that have like gangs, civil wars, or like feudal systems. And they'll look for who's like the most savage, violent ones, or like who's the best at war and fighting. And they'll take the strongest. All right. So that actually does remind me. I did forget a Space Marine chapter, the White Scars, who are space Mongols. And so like every chapter has their specialist. So like the Dark Angels are like good with like heavy weapons and good at fighting Xenos. The Ultramarines are like good for like anti-Tyranid invasions. Space Wolves are really good at close combat. And then there's the Imperial Fist are good at defensive tactics. There's the Raven Guard, who are like kind of the stealthiest unit. They're really good at stealth. And their Primarch was like from a planet where he was actually he was like a Union striker and stuff like that on his planet. And he organized all this revolution and hates dictators, despite his father's pretty much the biggest dictator there ever was.
Interesting.
But they were good at stealth. And the White Scars, their thing is they have like motorcycles. So they're all on motorcycle. Yeah. So they're a bunch of Space Marines on motorcycles and power armor.
I'm trying to visualize all of this because
you can Google this stuff. It's like I'm not like describing anything there's not art or images of.
Yeah. Space Marine motorcycle. How do you get? I mean, it seems like their armor. Oh, I mean, I guess these motorcycles.
Yeah, the motorcycle's the size of my car. Yeah, so like, and also, so the salamanders, like their thing is fire. They're really good with fire. But so the Space Marines, like I said, so they recruit these people. So if you make it through the recruitment process, which, to be honest, there's a really good chance you do not.
Sad.
Like, I think most chapters, part of their process is you have to go find a giant monster on that planet and kill it without like weapons.
Oh.
Yeah. So then they do this surgery where they put in a second heart a third lung. They give you all these special like cells that like organs that produce like more cells. So you're like always ripped and you become like 7 foot tall. They give you another organ that makes it so like all of your wounds instantly scar over. And they basically make it that like you can breathe in space and like you're immune to most toxins and poisons.
Question.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I don't know.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So yeah, God, we're almost an hour in and we're barely through everything that I was trying to cover.
Boy.
So, yeah, so like I said, then they get this armor that's kind of powered and it's like really over the top armor. It's heavy. Like a normal human could not get in this armor without dying. So then they are given the bolter, which is their weapon. The bolter fires a gun that's about the size of your fist in width and about the size of a beer bottle. That's the bullet.
Okay.
The bullet then proceeds to fly at its target. And it fires so hot that it creates a shell. It's a shellless round that creates a shell. And it spins because it has like gyroscopic rockets on it. When it's armor piercing, and then when it hits it, it explodes.
That's pretty dope.
Yeah. That's somehow not even like the coolest part of Space Marines. So then they have a heavy bolter, which is like that, but even bigger. And that's operated by Devastator Marines. There's these guys called Terminators who wear even bigger Space Marine armor. And they're usually like the oldest, most elite members of the Space Marines. So like they're in the first company. So they're like the veterans, and like they're just like the Terminators are really good at close combat. And they have the assault cannon. So like, you know how there's the minigun, which will like eat a car?
Yeah.
The assault cannon is even bigger and will do that to a tank.
Oh?
Yeah. Then there's flamers, which are really powerful jet powered flamethrowers, pretty much.
Wait. Hold on. Are we talking like normal tanks or like weird ass like this universe tanks?
Yes.
I understand.
Yeah. Some tanks, no. Like the Lehman Russ or the Baneblade, no. But some other tanks, yes. The assault cannon will absolutely eat them up. There's plasma guns, but plasma guns are very unsafe in this universe because there's a good chance. So like one of the mechanics in the game is when you use plasma guns, you could supercharge them, but you have to roll to see if it explodes up in your face or not.
Oh.
Yeah. So like that's the danger of plasma guns.
So it's like a high risk, high reward thing?
Yeah. Now melee weapons, because you need melee weapons in the grim dark future.
Of course. Chain
swords. It's like a chainsaw and a sword. I like it. It's my favorite weapon.
I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool as hell, but is it really practical other than it's
I think like part of it is it like burns super hot while it's spinning, so it will cut through anything.
Okay, then that makes sense. Because I'm just like, man, that sounds like edgy as shit and cool, but
yeah. And then they have like force swords, which have like a force field around them that allow them to cut through stuff. There's the power fist, which is like a fist that punches super strong. A lot of Terminators have that. They have like a gravity hammer, pretty much. They have shields that project force fields that also act as giant shields. And then Space Marines have tanks, which seems like the most redundant thing ever.
The tanks are in tanks.
Yeah, because each Space Marine, like most people, so like Space Marines are pretty like fast. The tanks kind of just to chew up, like in gameplay, to chew up bullets until you can get something there. And Space Marines also have drop pods. So like they'll drop from orbit in these drop pods, and like often you can use them as like a projectile itself to hit things, and they'll get out and just start shooting everywhere. And Space Marines, so like Space Marines are like the scalpel. Like they're for very precise things, despite the fact each one of them is the size of a tank, and they're for special operations. And you don't field a lot of them. Like in the game, a big Space Marine army is like 40 miniatures. So that's like maybe 4 to 5 squads. That would be like a big Space Marine, or like 30 or 40 miniatures in a tank. Maybe that's a big Space Marine army. Anyway, so then there's now there's Primaris Marines, which are even bigger Space Marines with even bigger and better weapons. And then then there's the Melt Gun, which just shoots like super hot heat and will melt tanks. But it has to be used in very close proximity.
Okay. That's pretty dope.
Yeah.
Another that seems like another like big high risk, high reward kind of thing.
Yeah, because you have to get really close to what you want to hit. But at the same time, also one of my goals is to figure out by the end of this podcast, figure out by what army you would play as. So that being said, let's talk about the Imperial Guard, who I actually think you'd like, but I do not recommend starting an army because they have not updated Imperial Guard very well in the latest editions of the game. So Imperial Guard, I said the Space Marines are the scalpel of the Imperium of Mankind. They're very precise. They're like a Swiss Army knife. They are very versatile. The Imperial Guard is the sledgehammer. So the Imperial Guard has a bunch of different groups. So there's like your standard Imperial Guardsmen, mostly the Cadians, when you see this, are like conscripts who are kind of conscripted into battle. They have like a National Guardsman worth of training. They're given a laser rifle and they're told to go hold the line. So they're like basically use a lot of World War I tactics in the grim dark future. Makes sense, right?
Because those worked out so well.
Yeah, wait till I tell you about the Death Corps of Krieg.
Oh.
Yeah, so like each planet has like its own specialty for the Imperial Guard. So like there's the Steel Legion are from Armageddon. Armageddon is a planet so toxic that like you can't really survive outside of a tank. And also it's had like 5 different wars on it. Like there's literally one war that got so insanely violent, it just started summoning corn demons.
Oh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty insane. Again, Armageddon could be an episode by itself. So the Steel Legion, and then like a lot of the cities like some of their soldiers used to be in gangs, so they're better at close quarters combat. They have like tanks, they're really good, and they wear like gas masks all the time because their planet's terrible. They kind of have like a World War I armor vibe to them.
That's pretty.
Oh, and the thing about Imperial Guards, all their tanks look like Google Imperial Guard tanks right now. They look like World War I tanks with like all these different turrets and stuff. And a lot of times people,
cool.
Yeah, they make no sense at all. But that's also kind of the Empire. Like I want you to understand, inventing new things is outlawed in the Imperium of Mankind.
Oh.
Yeah, you literally get shot by a group of people called the Inquisition who work for the Church, the God Emperor of Mankind, and will purge any heresy at all cost.
So I'm looking at like a cutaway of one of these tanks right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here.
Does it say?
What?
Does it say what tank it is?
Baneblade.
Yeah, so the Baneblade is fucking huge. It's also the most expensive model, I think. I think it's like $160 to buy the model.
Oh.
Yeah, the Imperial Guard is pricey. I hope they kind of upgrade them in the future so you could buy Imperial Guardsmen and not go broke. There's a meme within the Warhammer community that people who play Space Marines, because Space Marines can be pricey, use their parents' money. And people who play Imperial Guards use their money and they spend up a hell of a lot more of it. I am a Space Marines player. I don't use my parents' money though. So as I say, Imperial Guard are all crazy. So there's the Kachins who are all basically Rambo. And they're like all like, if you look up like Catchan, so the CAT, for people who are wondering, that's spelled CATCHAN. They all look like John Rambo from Predator. And they're all just like ripped, muscular men.
That's pretty sick.
And they're like called in to fight in the jungle. They're supposed to be pretty stealthy too. And because of this, like the Catchans are like really good at close quarters combat, and are often like just kind of the like. Imagine, have you played Duke Nukem ever, or like know that that like meme of the guy talking like this?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with Duke Nukem. I just haven't played the games, but I'm very familiar with the franchise.
Yeah, or so basically every Catchan is Doom guy.
Hell yeah, dude! I've been playing the Doom Eternal DLC.
I've just started playing Doom Eternal.
It's so good.
Mm-hmm. I love the flashback of rip and tear, rip and. That's basically Korn. Korn is just in your ears going rip and tear.
Hell yeah! Dude, I was getting Doom vibes from that, because I've like Doom has just like been my obsession. Like right now, it's my current hyper fixation.
Basically, the Space Marines, to put them best, the Space Marines are an army of Doom guys.
Hell yeah!
But all really religious.
I don't think Doom guy has much of a taste for religion. No.
Does he like literally kill angels in the Doom Eternal?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he pretty much just killed God. I don't think he gives a shit.
He gives zero shits. He just shoots and fucking rips apart whatever's in his way.
Yeah. So moving on though. So then there's the Valhallan Ice Warriors, who are like Kozak Russians. Or like Russians. They're from an ice planet called Valhalla. It's cold and miserable. And in like this like blurb of lore, they're all issued vodka.
I like that.
Yeah. Then there's like, I'm trying to think of some other ones. Oh, there's the Morty and Iron Guard. And their whole thing is like, they're kind of they're like rich ROTC kids.
Nice.
They're an army of like, they march in like 18th century style line tactics. They're all like wearing dress uniforms, and they get shot to hell.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. And then there's, the group I like, the Deathcore Krieg. Look this up. Deathcore Kriegs. Yeah, so basically their aesthetic is World War I Germany.
They're pretty cool.
Yeah. Now the unfortunate thing about them is they're very popular with the white nationalist group of players in the game.
I wonder why.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a problem with Warhammer. It's very appealing to people who don't get this as a parody, making fun of their ideology.
I mean, because it just makes it look cool.
To be honest, yeah. I mean, fascism would look cool if you got to be a Space Marine.
Like, I can see why people would gravitate towards that, because the aesthetic is awesome.
Yeah. We are not talking about the Tau today. We'll talk about the works, but we'll have to talk about Tau and some other stuff another time.
Holy shit, it's been an hour already.
Yeah. Fuck. Anyway, so I'm going to try to wrap. So the Deathcore Creeps are from this planet that had a civil war trying to rebel against the Empire. So they did the reasonable thing and nuked their own planet to stop that. So now their planet's completely barren and has no resources. So as kind of penance for their sin of rebelling against the God Emperor of mankind, every person born on this planet, every man, and most of them are born in test tubes, becomes an Imperial Guardsman. So there's these guys called commissars in the Imperial Guard who are like political officers who shoot anybody who runs away. The commissars in the Deathcore Krieg have to keep people from suicidally running into battle because they're brainwashed to give their lives for the God Emperor of mankind.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Like their tactic is like, they're gonna run out of ammunition before we run out of guys. So they'll basically be sent to wherever they see huge sieges to just kind of overwhelm and break the siege. Like they're kind of the swarm, even though there's like one group of aliens called the Tyranids, which are literally like the bugs from Starship Troopers, and they're like supposed to use the swarm tactics. The Imperial Guard are kind of the swarm tactics guys of Warhammer, where it's like you have a lot of guys, they will die, but it's for the God Emperor of mankind.
That's like really dark.
Yeah, it's grimdark. That's the whole aesthetic. I mean, there's literally a god who gives you nothing but disease.
Yeah, this is not a good feel universe.
No, the only people who are having any fun are the orcs. But we'll get to that. So the other thing about the Imperial Guard is like I read this somewhere. The expected lifespan of an Imperial Guardsman on the battlefield is 15 hours.
Oh,
yeah.
To be honest, that's more than I expected.
Yeah, there are like battles where it's just like, that platoon of new guys just got completely wiped out. Keep in mind that's the average.
Right.
So like there are some guys who make it a long time and there are other guys who don't.
Who just like get fucking annihilated instantly.
Anyway, so move on. Let's talk about the himbos of the galaxy orcs.
I love himbos.
Yeah, so orcs are the only guys having a good time. Everybody else is that meme of I am straight up not having a good time. Orcs are like I am having a great time.
I'm having a good time.
Orcs are fungus.
Oh?
So yeah, orcs don't like there are no females orcs. They're all just kind of dudes being dudes. And they kind of like literally orcs will like get a limb cut off and then that limb will become an orc and they're dropping spores. So once an orc invasion is on a planet, you're always dealing with orcs from there on.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So orcs are awesome. Nothing about orcs makes sense. One, they, like I said, they kind of breed by spawning fungus. Insane. They're also the only faction we know about how their economic system works, because the orcs use teeth as an economic system. They'll just rip their own teeth out or punch other orcs and steal their teeth.
Do they grow back? Or
yeah, no, orcs grow everything back.
Okay, I was gonna say like, what the fuck?
Orcs are also magical. So orcs were created by the old ones, those guys I mentioned earlier. And orcs have the greatest magic system worth ever believed. So orcs are all idiots. So they'll put together all these machines that shouldn't work and all these weapons that shouldn't work and these spaceships that should just explode. But instead, they work because they believe it works. Yes, that's how orcs magic works. They believe in something, it works.
They're literally powered by
imagination
and faith.
Yes. So color plays a great part into orcs. So they think red is the fastest color, obviously. Purple is the sneakiest. And like all camo literally makes everything hard to see. No matter if it blends in or not. Yellow has two meanings. Either yellow is worth a lot because the yellow is the color of their teeth, so it's worth a lot, or yellow makes things more explodier. And green is the most powerful because green is the orkiest color. And I want to state, yes, explodier is the proper term for what orcs think it means.
I like the orcs a lot.
Yes. People love the orcs because they are just like, I painted my tank red, so it's going to go fast. So how powerful this belief system is, there's one guy who's a commissar who's done nothing but fight orcs his entire life. Now, the orcs respect him so much, they believe he's an orc. So he's able to use orc technology. So like he beat the shit out of this one orc and he lost his arm. So he took the robotic arm of this orc and put it on. And just now he can use it. But like, nobody says it should work, but because the orcs believe he's an orc, he can use their technology. Now, there's two cases. One is real. The other one's kind of just like a meme that's circulated around forums. So the other one is that the orcs have two gods, Mork and Gork. Mork is clever but cunning. Gork is cunning but clever. I'm letting that sink in on you.
Huh. I think I get it.
Yeah. The orcs are idiots. I can't harp on that enough. The orcs are the only ones having a good time because they're too stupid to understand anything. So the orcs, I'm sorry about the laugh. Because they believe in these gods kind of just do exist, and they're always fighting on this planet. And because so many orcs believe in them, they've just gotten huge. That's the other thing is the more powerful an orc is, the bigger it gets. So like the orc leaders are the biggest.
How big are we talking?
Huge.
Neat.
Yeah, like I don't have specific sizes, but big. Like a normal orc is as big as a space marine who's like 7 feet tall. They got these little gremlin things called Gretchens that like operate their tanks and stuff. And they kind of just use them as cannon fodder. Yeah. So those are the orcs.
They're my favorite.
Oh, they're everybody. Now, there's this story, and I don't know how true it is. So the story goes like this, that there's these Imperial Guardsmen, and they're surrounded by orcs. They're firing at orcs, and they run out of ammunition, and the orcs are still coming at them. So their commander looks at his gun, his empty gun. There's no ammunition. So he points at an orc and goes, bang, with his mouth. He goes, bang, and the orc falls dead. So all of his soldiers look at him, then look at the orcs and just start going bang, 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 bang. And the orcs start falling dead until this group of orcs carrying another orc comes at them and they shoot at it, but nothing's working. And they hear the orcs chanting as it gets closer. I'm a tank, I'm a tank, I'm a tank, I'm a tank, I'm a tank.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the orcs are the best faction in Warhammer. Like, I don't play orcs, but like they are the best lore faction ever.
I like them a lot.
Yeah. So now let's talk about the communist, because I think we will have time for them. The Tau. So the Tau are kind of, they're aliens. So their whole thing is they're for the greater good. Like all for one, one for all. So they're the closest thing to good guys this entire galaxy has. The Tau have they have like drones and robots and stuff that fight with them. They also have like manga styled mech suits they use in battle. And they have like, they're really good at long range warfare. They have like all these rail guns and stuff. And the Tau themselves are these like not faceless, they're noseless aliens. They're all short guys. So I think they're all like 5'7" or so. And they have like hooves for feet. They have a caste system, but like everybody's welcome. Like they're the only faction that doesn't actively genocide every race it comes across. So Chaos just kills everything for the fun of killing. Humanity just purges anything that's not human. The Eldar kill anything that's not Eldar, and the Necrons kill anything that's alive. And the Tyranids eat everything. So the Tau try to like indoctrinate people into their society and like integrate as many aliens. And there's actually like humans that serve in the Tau army. There's actually a book written about it. About a human in the Tau army. And now the Tau's thing, I actually play as Tau in addition to Space Marines, and they're fun. They're long range, and they're like have these robot suits, and they're kind of like based a lot off of like one Japan, kind of Imperial Japan, and as well as like Japanese manga and power suits. So I don't know if you're looking at them right now, but that's where their influences come from. Now, the thing is, they have this thing called the Ether and the Ethereals, who like their version of Psychers. The Tau can also not be corrupted by chaos, nor can orcs, but that's because orcs just don't know what anything else. But everything else can be pretty much corrupted. So the Tau can't be corrupted because they don't have a connection to the warp, but instead they have the ethereals. Now, a lot of people believe the ethereals are mind washing everybody to join the Tau. And actually, that's like the dark secret of the Tau, but they're still the least terrible group of people.
Of course, the tankies are the least terrible.
Yeah. So now let's get on to the bugs.
Oh boy.
The Tyranids. The Tyranids and the Gene Stealers. So the Tyranids are giant bugs, like they're huge, like kaiju-sized bugs. And they just consume everything. And they have these hive fleets, which are basically like giant versions of them that float in space. And then like they'll find the planet and they'll consume it. And the Tyranid, like they'll eat everything. So like there's one planet that's just Tyranids and orcs endlessly battling each other and eating each other. And the Tyranids, like they'll actually like infiltrate society so they send these things called lictors first, which are like, you know how xenomorphs are in Alien?
Yeah.
Tyranids are all xenomorphs, kind of.
Dope.
Yeah, so the Tyranids like will send this like scouting group of lictors that will like infect humanity and begin these things called gene stealers, which are like human hybrids. The first groups of generation gene stealers look pretty human. They might have like yellow eyes or deformed heads, but as they go on, they get more and more bug looking to this like point. They're just bug people. And then they'll like overthrow. And then when the invasion force of Tyranids arrives, the gene stealer cultists will literally just march into the mouth of the biggest Tyranid to be consumed by it to give the Tyranids more power.
Oh,
yeah.
Looking at pictures right now.
Yeah,
I'm digging a lot of these designs.
So the Tyranids also do have guns. They're not like a complete melee army. Now their guns fire smaller Tyranids that burrow into things.
I like that.
Which I think is the funniest thing. Just a gun that fires a smaller version of yourself.
Imagine if humans just had baby guns.
It's more like a fetus gun, really.
Just had a fucking gun that just launches fucking babies.
Yep. So that is like pretty much that's all the factions I can think of. And that's just a brief, like we could really do an episode on all of them. But Tyler, what do you think of the insane world of Warhammer 40,000?
I don't know what to think. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, I love it because it's just how ridiculous it is.
So it's so much.
Yeah. So it's so much like I said, we just spent like an hour and 15 minutes going over a nutshell description of everything. And I didn't cover everything. Like there's stuff I'm leaving out just because this would be a 3-hour podcast if I just went over the base brief description of every faction ever.
Oh my.
You listen to Behind the Bastards, right?
Yeah.
Robert Evans is a big Warhammer fan.
Really?
Yeah, he talks about it on the few interviews and episodes.
Yeah,
but yeah, so Tyler, of all the factions, which army would you want to play with? And
so I still don't really have much of an idea of how the game works. So if I had like a fundamental understanding of the gameplay, that might change my answer.
Yeah,
I'm gonna stick with the orcs.
Yeah, I think a lot. The orcs, quite frankly, if you're ever to get into this, the orcs are the best because they're the most straightforward. They have some of the cheapest models, and you can just have the most fun with them.
They just seem.
Yeah, and like I also kind of think you'd like Guardsmen because they're all inspired by history. Except the only problem is the Games Workshop neglects Guardsmen the hell.
Oh.
Yeah, so you have to buy like a lot of third-party kits to make good Guardsman army. Like there's one Guardsman faction I left out that were basically all based off like the British Army in Africa. But Games Workshop discontinued that because they realized how bad it was that they were making the comparison of Imperial Guardsmen fighting orcs to British soldiers fighting African natives.
Yeah, that's cringe.
Yeah. So like now let's talk about the real world of Warhammer. I told you is like it's like a tabletop strategy game. So it's my best description is it's overly complex chess.
Oh, okay.
With way too many rules. And I
chess
love
is
it.
Already a little bit complex for me.
Oh, I love this game now. There's like some video games you can check out too. Like
I didn't know that Warhammer had tabletop component to it. I only thought it was a video game for a long time.
No, Warhammer. So funny thing about Warhammer is they had the opportunity to make a ton of money. There's these guys who were creating an RTS game that was going to be really popular from Korea, but Warhammer didn't give them the license. So they just kind of rebranded and rewrote everything. And now that's StarCraft.
Oh,
yeah. That was going to be a Warhammer game.
Oh, wow. Huge missed opportunity there.
Yeah. And just like a few years later, they fell into some more Games Workshop fell into some financial trouble. They're doing better now, but yeah. So the community as a whole, like I'm joked about like the community being pretty bomb. There's a lot of good people in it. The problem is there are people like this one guy who went by Arch Warhammer, who was just like a straight up Nazi. And like God, this guy's so cringy. He compared himself to the Jesus of Warhammer because like actual Games Workshop reached out to him because he used to go by Arch Warhammer. I think he just goes by Arch now because YouTube won't delete a Nazi off of YouTube.
Okay.
So Arch Warhammer basically said, if you use our name with you, we will bring down our legal team on you. Us, a multi-million games company, versus you, a fat, ugly guy on the internet.
Oh, shit.
They didn't say that word for word, but that's kind of what they said in their cease and desist. It's like, we are a giant company. You are you. We will fuck your shit up. Yeah.
I mean, at least I like to hear that the company just doesn't like want to associate with that part of the fan base.
Yeah, and like Warhammer did this whole thing like Warhammer's for everybody, which I love. Like all the right way, it's like clearly it's not for everybody. If you don't want us to be racist and playing, it's like, yeah, no. So then they did a secondary email after that. That's like, if you are going to be like an awful racist, please take your money somewhere else. We don't care.
I like to hear that.
Yeah. So Warhammer, all in all, is crazy. And I guess that's the end of this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tyler, how'd you enjoy this?
I was having a good time. This is all just...
Do you understand anything I said? Are you more confused, less confused?
I'm less confused because at least I have an idea of what this is all about now. Because before we started talking today, I didn't know a single thing about Warhammer other than it's called Warhammer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think so. We'll do some. I think our next episode we're going to be talking about Falcon and Winter Soldier. Right? I think that's our plan. I was Captain America.
I wanted to do a thing about Captain America and Superman.
Yeah.
And that patriotic Boy Scout trope.
Yeah, so come back next time for to talk about some patriotic boys in blue. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. We are Chaos Effect, and pray to your chosen chaos god.
I will.